From the Parkland shooting to the Oscars to campus craziness, the inherent contradictions of progressive thought and action. Next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Duke, and thanks for joining us. As always, I am joined for the first segment by Katie Petrick of the Healthy Republic for The Countdown.
All right, so we're going to begin today's countdown with the story that's been dominating the headlines for the past couple weeks. Students returned to class Wednesday at Parkland, on Wednesday after the shooting took 17 lives on February 14th. So for the first time, students are coming back to class, to the site where they lost many of their friends and their fellow teachers. So a lot of teachers, students, parents were understandably upset. And a lot of them actually have come out and said they're not quite sure if they will be able to return to school at all. And then we do have David Hogg, the senior who has been basically the face of political propaganda now for the past couple weeks. And he has said that he will not return to school, not because he's grieving, but because he will not return until gun legislation, some sort of gun control legislation is passed.
Yeah, you know, this is America, and if David Hogg, in fact, I'm going to officially rename him here, Mike, M-I-C Hogg. So he's Mike Hogg, because that seems to be his profession. If Mike Hogg is going to go out and use this as an opportunity to promote himself, to promote his future political career, to promote his ambitions in journalism, as he's already said. If he's going to do that, he has every right to do that. We have every right to criticize it. I've heard a lot from Mike Hogg about politics and about blame and about all sorts of social issues that really aren't even related to this tragedy. What I haven't heard much about is what he feels, or those kids that were lost, or there's no taking time, there's no grieving going on here. And because he's being exploited. This young man is being exploited. He has become a face. You listen to some of his interviews that he's contradicted himself from one forum to another. He's asked to weigh in on things that are way, way, way beyond his experience level and his critical thinking level. And then, of course, as we know, there's a certain moral authority that's been conferred on him, right? Twitter is protecting his account. Twitter is allowing him to say all these things, to engage in serious policy discussions without allowing anybody else to respond to him. And anybody who challenges him is immediately blocked. So we've reached the point now where we've seen enough of Mike Hogg that we know he is, whatever else you want to say about him, there's an inverse proportion to his grief and his ambition. And this is America. He's not the first person who's taken Rahm Emanuel's advice and capitalized on a tragedy. But for me, it diminishes the tragedy, right? It diminishes the tragedy. It diminishes the lives of his lost classmates. It diminishes the suffering of those families who don't think they can set foot in that school ever again. And I'll say one last thing about this. By that argument, Mr. Mike Hogg, don't ever go to college, because college is not able to protect you any more than elementary high school is. Don't go into a private business. Don't go to work for a company, because a company is no more able to protect you than was that high school. The bottom line is that what you want is a complete ban on guns before you go, or common sense gun control. This doesn't just apply to your high school. You're not going to go to your high school. Don't go to college. Sit there and be a media personality for the rest of your life in the safety of your mom's basement. But if you're going to play that game, it has consequences far, far, far beyond the tragedy you seem to be ignoring.
Yeah, and he's getting his 15 minutes of fame right now, and we are treating him, and it's not just him. There are others and who are taking the spotlight just in the same manner he is. We're getting reports now, possibly, that some of these students are already getting book deals, or they're being approached to weigh in on how they feel, but they're teenagers and they're grieving. And to approach them and give them this sort of a forum with the spotlight on them when they don't know how to handle their emotions in private, to be able to just put them out in front. It's treating, you're giving them this platform where they're children, and you're making them seem like adults. Let
me ask this to Mom and Dad America out there. You've got Caskey, you've got Gonzalez, you've got Hogg, the three main players in this. Go ahead and name one more kid who died. Give me the name of one more of those kids who was shot. One of the kids who actually died in the shooting. I'll bet you there's not 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 Americans who can name one other kid except those three kids. And that seems to me to be the biggest problem, right?
Yeah.
That we have we all know the shooter's name. We all know those three activists' name. Who else?
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I mean when I say this tragedy has been exploited by progressive adults. The victims of this exploitation are the dead, whose names we don't know. And the victims are these three kids who are being exploited in their opportunity to become ambitious politicians on the backs of what happened at that school.
Yeah, and while they are children being treated as adults, we actually have on University universities across the nation, but especially right now at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where we have adults being and acting and being treated like children. There's a protest going on for the graduate students at Urbana-Champaign, and they have gone on strike because they don't have a contract for their graduate assistantships. And so instead of talking to administration, working through it, they went on strike. And now classes for the undergrads have been canceled all over campus, and all you see is these protests happening.
Well, and what kind of demands are they making? Aren't they asking for daycare? These graduate students are demanding that the university provide daycare for their children. What else are they demanding?
Yeah. So basically what happens is when you are a grad assistant, I was a grad assistant, I'm not quite sure about you, but they already have tuition waivers. Mm-hmm. So their tuition is covered. They get a stipend, so they get paid. They already get most of their insurance covered, and now they want to also get better health care. Mm-hmm. They want more money being given to them when they already have these things. And their main concern, at least they claim the main concern, is that they don't want their waivers to possibly be taken away from them. Because right now, they don't have a contract, but in the old contract, it was guaranteed that they would get it. The administration isn't that dumb. They're not going to get rid of their tuition waiver, and yet these supposed to be graduate students are out there canceling classes and not working for what
I think your primary point was the important one, that we have all sorts of circumstances in this country and what's happening with college kids behaving like babies. It's not just at University of Illinois Urbana. You've got adult kids in college campuses whining and crying because Donald Trump got elected, requiring the universities to provide psychiatric care and coloring books and puppy petting rooms for them. And these are the same kids that then turn around and shout down and violently protest conservative speakers. So you can't have it both ways. This is a cultural phenomenon. When there's a left-wing issue at stake, kids younger and younger and younger are recruited for the cause and given moral authority. When it's a conservative cause or an anti-liberal cause, over and over again, the age of adulthood goes up. So under Obamacare, kids aren't adults until they're 27, right? There's a big movement now to push with the Parkland killing. There's a big movement now to raise the legal gun ownership age to 21. Mm-hmm. And you see how the progressives work. For initiatives they want kids to vote younger. They want kids to vote younger to get rid of guns, to eliminate the Second Amendment, and to maybe even vote. There's a movement to push voting down to 16. On the other hand, to own a gun, you got to be older. You're a child for Obamacare until you're 27. And so you see how they want to have it both ways. And these kids, again, are caught in the crossroads.
Yeah, and at the same time, if you take a look at it, if we're looking at the Parkland shooting, it's all about the Second Amendment, getting rid of it. If you look at these Illinois strikers on the college campuses, they're across the nation want to get rid of free speech. But in both instances, these groups coming together, they are using the First Amendment, if you look at the clause about that you're allowed to assemble and you're allowed to petition the government for grievances. And so they only want certain rights if it aligns with their propaganda. But if it doesn't, you're out of luck. That's
right. And it's called fascism. If you want to be very clear about that, right? When the way you approach things and the kind of power that you seek to wield allows you to rewrite the rules for your causes while absolutely preserving those things that are already on the books that support you. Denying to others what you have for yourself, to piecemeal cut apart the Constitution, these values protect our progressive causes, at least at this time. These don't, so we're going to get rid of them. And you see how they play that game. And again, with the ages of these kids, right? So kids at younger and younger ages now have this absolute moral authority. We got to listen to them, can't criticize them. They engage in policy discussion. We're not allowed to debate them. We're not even allowed to challenge their ideas or suggest that there are ulterior motives at play here. By the same token, you've got adults, 24, 25, 26, 30-year-old adults who are demanding to be treated like children, coddled and protected, demanding have every aspect of their life taken care of for them. And that's the paradox of liberalism in a nutshell.
All right, Professor, we are going to address a lot of the educational stories that we have going on in the news right now. So I'm going to give you 3 headlines, and I want you to give me the common denominator. Okay, and I know you're an English professor, but it's a common denominator. This is the only math you'll have to do. I'm going to give you 3 headlines. You ready?
That's what I was going to ask you. Common denominator. By that you mean that which all 3 stories have in common, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to check with you because my math is highly, highly suspect. So lay it on me.
All right, here we go. So first story, the Purdue Online Writing Lab. So this is a website where millions of students use to cite their sources when they're writing their papers or hopefully writing their own papers. But so it's Purdue Online Writing Lab, and they are banning the use of the word man. Then we have Stanford University, and their recreation center introduces women's only lifting hours. Okay. Stanford University. And then finally, we have a transgender boy wins Texas Girls Wrestling Championship for the second year in a row. And this transgender boy has a 36-0 season now. So we have the Purdue Online Writing Lab banning the use of the word man. We have Stanford University's Rec Center introducing women's-only lifting hours, and a transgender boy winning a girls' wrestling state championship.
And I think the common denominator here, if you boil it down to its rarest form, is the deconstruction of manhood. It is the war on masculinity. It is the idea that the word man is so, men are offensive, that men are toxic. At the University of Wisconsin-Madison, incoming freshmen, boys in particular, are exposed to a course on toxic masculinity, that kids are taught early and often at Madison that to be male is to be toxic. And so I went to Purdue. And so the OWL, the Online Writing Lab, is one of the biggest and most famous in the world. People all over the country go to it for grammar tips, for all sorts of advice. And when the Purdue OWL actually comes out and says, we're not going to let people use the word man anymore. It's one thing for a university, it's one thing for a university resource to say, you know what, we recommend as academics that you don't use that word. For the Purdue Online Writing Lab to come out and say you cannot use that word, we will not permit it, again, as a venture into authoritarianism. How did we get to the point where, in a very short order, where we moved from things like the N-word or sexual slurs or using the C word against a woman? How did we move from the fact that that was speech that was beyond the pale to now simply the word man is offensive? That shows you what we were talking about in the previous segment, how quickly and how insidiously liberalism works. The word man is banned now. What's it going to be tomorrow? We're going to at some point we'll ban all pronouns altogether, and so that's a big one. I went to Purdue, so I'm aware of how that functions. Stanford University is another example, where Stanford University is basically saying that we are going to create an inclusive campus by banning men from gymnasiums at certain hours of the day. Right? Some women feel that they are uncomfortable around men. Now, here's the kick. If you're a man who thinks he's a woman, you are allowed into the gym at that time, right? And so it seems to me that what you have here is something utterly unconstitutional, something that is in itself inherently contradictory, that we're going to make the gym more diverse by banning men at certain times. And the good news is that Stanford has already been so called on the carpet by this that they have now had to create special hours where men alone are in the gym. Unless, of course, you're a woman who pretends they're a man. And that third story, I think, too, is about deconstructing masculinity. It's about a girl who has been taking serious hormone therapy, testosterone, masculinity. It's ironic, isn't it? That masculinity is the enemy. But if you're a little girl who wants to be a little boy, we're going to pump you full of that masculinity, right? Yep. We're going to take that testosterone, which is the source of all evil, right? Spit and gum chewing manhood, and we're going to inject it into the little girl's veins. We're going to make her much stronger than other girls her age, and then we're going to let her wrestle with the girls, right? Yep. Where this, for the second year in a row, this girl that has the physical hormones pumped into her of a boy, she's won again. And the girl that she beat was 52, the actual girl, not the man girl, the actual girl that she beat was 52-0. She had wrestled the best Texas wrestler girls and beaten all of them. And now she loses for the second consecutive year. She loses the title to a woman pumped full of testosterone. So I guess the moral of the story is that masculinity has to be deconstructed unless you're injecting it into women, at which point they get to lord it over women and pound them down and steal their dreams. That seems to be the message we're talking about here.
Yeah, it does seem to be that. Okay, well, we're going to go over to Hollywood now because that's always a fun place to go. So this year's Oscars are again being hosted by the one and only Jimmy Kimmel, and he recently stated that he will not bring up the many sexual misconduct allegations against Hollywood elites. However, President Donald Trump is, just able, he can joke all he wants about Donald Trump, and he said that you can't go too far when making jokes of Donald Trump. So what are we thinking about Jimmy Kimmel and his Oscar performance?
I see a theme that we didn't necessarily plan on that's beginning to emerge here. What all of these stories, all of these comments are going to have in common is the hideously, paradoxically contradictory nature of progressivism. And I think Jimmy Kimmel is a walking, talking, living, breathing example of this paradox, right? So Jimmy Kimmel, who's hosting the Oscars, says, I will not talk about the endless accusations of sexual abuse and misconduct by Hollywood actors and directors. I'm not going to talk about it. These people, Kimmel said, these actors and directors, they've worked so hard for so long. As little kids, they dreamed about holding this golden statue. I'm not going to ruin their moment by reminding them that the statistical odds of sitting next to an abuser are probably about 50%, giving all the accusations that we've had here. Hell, even the seat warmers that sit down when you go to the bathroom has probably molested somebody in Hollywood, given all the numbers that are coming out. So rather than talk about the obvious perverted elephant in the room, what he's going to do is spend all his time talking about Trump as a sexual predator. And so you are paradox. We keep hearing from the left, speak truth to power. Yeah. There are few citizens of America in this country with more power collectively than the Hollywood establishment. More money, more wealth, more privilege, more access to all of us. They can get a mic put in front of them at any time they want on any street corner to opine about anything they want to. They are power, they are privilege, and Jimmy Kimmel, who's one of them, will not tell them the truth about sexual abuse. Meanwhile, he'll spend his time talking about Donald Trump. That goes to show you that they are a bunch of frauds, phonies, hypocrites, and as Kimmel has demonstrated time and time again, so radically out of touch, so utterly egomaniacally proud of his own liberal value signaling that he's willing to let a room full of perfect culprits and candidates for real serious verbal smackdown. I mean, tell me, it wouldn't be comedy. He's even violated what comedians do. He calls himself a comedian. He's a bad one. You got a room full of people who are one big joke. Can you imagine Dustin Hoffman sitting next to somebody and what you could say about that? Can you imagine Meryl Streep and all her huggy, kissy pictures with the Weinstein perpetrator, right? Oh, so you could do an Oprah segment, right? About giving him a big kiss. But no, Jimmy Kimmel is going to avoid that comedic gold. I'll tell you who wouldn't. Get Dave Chappelle to host next year's Oscars. I promise you, Chappelle will go after them like a dog on a bone because integrity is integrity when it comes to comedy. And if comedy is no longer about speaking truth to villains when they're sitting right in front of you, then get rid of the whole institution.
Sounds about a proper thing to do, I think. So I take it you're not going to be watching
watching the Oscars.
Okay,
no.
You have other things to do. But let's pretend for a moment, because I have 2 questions now.
Okay, it's 2 question time. Very exciting.
Yeah, this is my favorite part. So
now, I don't know these questions in advance, ladies and gentlemen.
So with the upcoming Oscars, I want to know, what would you be winning an Oscar for? So if you could win any Oscar award, I assume at some point you've watched the Oscars, so you at least know the categories. What kind of Oscar would you win? And what would your acceptance speech be?
All right. So if I was going to win any kind of an Oscar, I would win an honorary Lifetime Achievement Award.
Of course.
And my Lifetime Achievement Award would be for pointing out their own gender hypocrisy and their own social hypocrisy. So for instance, I would take my golden Oscar statue and I would point out that despite the name Oscar and the masculine musculature, he has no discernible genitals. Hashtag transitioning. I would also point out that why are you having Oscar, a male statuette, represent an academy that is both male and female? Hashtag me too. I would also point out that a golden statue signifies wealth and privilege, beyond which the Hollywood leftist socialists are love to deride, right? So hashtag Bernie Sanders. Why are you handing out gold statues? I would also point out that when you get an Oscar, you get a grab bag of goodies worth about $60,000. People who are already making about $60,000 every second get a grab bag of goodies. Hashtag fight consumerism now. I would get my Oscar for pointing out their own insipid hypocrisy. I go back to one famous episode of South Park, about 10 years ago, where they were satirizing the Oscars and they were talking about Hollywood smug, where all the Hollywood celebrities would literally, on the South Park episode, fart into a glass and drink it, right? And the cloud of smug, George Clooney, of course, was the perfect representative on that South Park episode for this kind of abortive smug, that cloud that was beginning to stifle us all. So that's what I would do. I would get my Marlon Brando-like, I would proudly cast my statue to the ground. I'd give my grab bag, my $60,000 grab bag of hair products, which clearly I don't need, to some homeless man on the street, and we would call it a day.
That's generous.
That's right.
Is that what your speech is going to be?
Actually, what we need is, like Marlon Brando did, we need a female Native American activist to come up and do all that in place of me. And I think we've got the perfect Oscar celebration. Now, that's an Oscar celebration that I would watch.
I think that was the most hashtags I've ever heard
Hashtag,
you use.
Hashtag damn straight.
All right. So, Donald Trump just wrapped up his first year. We talked about it last week. I want to know, I assume you know who Garth Brooks is.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the country singer.
I've been told I look like him.
Okay, so Garth Brooks is a country singer, and I want to know which of his songs best describes Donald Trump's first year in office. Here are your choices. I've got 4 choices. Donald Trump's first year in office. Is it Friends in Low Places? Is it The Dance? Is Donald Trump's first year in office Shameless? Or is it We Shall Be Free?
Wow. I think if you take the first 3, Shameless, The Dance, and what was the first one?
Friends in Low Places.
Friends in Low Places. I think that those 3 apply to his personality, his sometimes body attitude, his sometimes character lapses, his incessant need to tweet, his desire for absolute attention in all things. The first 3 song titles represent his personality. The last one was what?
We Shall Be Free.
And I think that represents the hope of Donald Trump. And I think millions and millions of Americans are willing to accept the first 3 song titles and all that the embarrassment and sometimes the humor and sometimes the eye rolls that it engenders, because we're going to get the third. More and more we're going to get the third. We are free, right? And you think about how Donald Trump has broken up regulations already. You think about how Donald Trump is the only serious president we've had about immigration in 40 years. You think about the degree to which Donald Trump has brokered some deals and has protected certain peoples and has done a pretty good job. I mean, there's a reason now, and this needs to be pointed out, Donald Trump's approval rating now is about 50%, 7 points higher than Barack Obama's was when he was at a similar point in office. Now, if there's a Garth Brooks song called Looking Silly in Mom Jeans, that's the song I would apply to Obama. I'm willing to grant that Donald Trump has all those other 3 songs as part of his baggage, but freedom is perhaps hopefully our most hopeful legacy for him.
All right, that's today's countdown.
Well, every time you turn on the news, it seems, there are more stories about campus intolerance. Progressive faculty and students are shutting down debate, censoring speech, threatening violence against conservative speakers and voices. Joining me now is someone making a real difference on college campuses. Ryan Fournier, political science major at Campbell University and chairman of Students for Trump. Ryan, tell us a little bit about your organization and what you've been able to do on campuses all across the country.
Of course, and thank you for having me on. So Students for Trump was founded as a small Twitter account in 2015 after I realized I loved Donald Trump and what he was saying. Wasn't speaking like a politician, blunt to the point, was talking about things that weren't being discussed. And I said, I want to support this guy. I want to see more of him. And so got out there, made this account. Within a month, about 15,000 followers came ringing in. Campaign eventually reached out, wanted to work with us closely. So we coordinated with them, and we grew this movement to what it is today and what it was throughout the election to help get Donald Trump elected. It was a large student movement, very much so based on the ground and online. We had a very large social media presence and still do. Hundreds of thousands of followers, millions of views every month. We basically used President Trump's brand and got millennials involved. They loved what they were seeing. They loved the Make America Great Again brand. It was patriotic, and they loved the revamping of American spirit. And this was something that we were very passionate about, and many other young people around the country were as well.
That's a great story. Now, you say the Trump administration actually reached out for you. Did you get to sit down with Donald Trump personally? And if so, how did that go?
On a couple different occasions, I was able to sit down with him. The first one was in Florence, South Carolina. It was actually the first time when I met him, and it was before a rally. He pulled us into the back room, I guess it's the green room, where then Lieutenant Governor Henry McMaster was in there meeting with him, and he actually held the rally for about 7 minutes past its start time just to talk to myself and my vice chair, John Lambert, about the student numbers and how he was polling in the different states. And one interesting thing that he said to us was, he was asking us, he said, how do you think I'm going to do in South Carolina? And then he talked a little bit about, we told him where we were from, North Carolina, talked a little bit about his golf courses there, how he loves the weather, just a little bit of small talk, but things that I pulled away from it. He's a very humble, individual. He can command a room of attention. People see him on stage, they see a different Donald Trump than you do when you're in person with him, when you shake his hand and you talk to him. He's very kind-hearted. But he knows when to put his foot down when the time is right. And that's something that we need in a leader. And that's what I saw in him in those, 10 minutes that I was in the room with him just talking to him. So it was a great honor. And the other different occasions were meetings where, we went over student numbers, which happened about 2 or 3 times prior. But I saw the same interaction and the same Donald Trump, then that I did the first time. He's a very genuine guy, and it was an honor getting him elected.
And you were very instrumental in mobilizing a demographic that ordinarily we don't associate with Republicans, and certainly not with somebody like Donald Trump. And that's what I wanted to ask you about next. Millennials get a bad rap. I mean, there's a lot of easy jokes made at the expense of millennials. They've grown up in a culture where they have been a little bit more sheltered in some ways. But I wanted to ask you about that. It is amazing to see that many millennial kids and how you've been able to mobilize them. What allows you to get through to these millennial kids, many of whom are college kids, with a non-progressive message when they're so bombarded with left-wing politics almost exclusively at places like university campuses?
What I always tell young people is get out there and get informed, learn on your own. Don't just, let your parents influence you or let your friends influence you. Learn stuff on your own. It's your civic duty to be informed and to vote. And to see young people like the ones that we worked with during the campaign getting out there and being involved and tabling and door knocking and passing out gear, registering people to vote was inspiring to many. And I think that it was just a chain reaction. It was a domino effect. People saw some individuals doing it, their friends doing it, and they wanted to get involved. And it was happening left and right. And it was very fortunate to see this on college campus, especially even the furthest of left. UC Berkeley, we had great presence at UC Berkeley. We had great presence at Penn State. Even go all the way down south. I mean, it's expected, but we had great presence at FSU, LSU. And it was really the brand behind President Trump. He created the Make America Great Again brand. He acknowledged, as well as many other Americans did over the years, that there was issues in this country that millennials were going to have to handle in the future, that the current baby boomers are handling now while serving in legislature. These are issues that aren't going to go away overnight. And it's going to be our generation that takes office and has to fix them. So to have the help of President Trump at least ease that burden that's going to be placed on us when we're in public office was very instrumental. And so we knew that this guy and all of what he was saying, and I don't know if you saw today, but the Heritage Foundation just said he completed 67% of what he promised to do, more so than President Reagan did during his first year. So it's absolutely amazing to see the progress that's been made. And I think that in itself motivated young people. How the things he was saying, the promises he was making, very viable. And to see now that it's getting delivered is going to be even more instrumental in getting him reelected. And also, of course, the greater scheme of things, making America great again, getting our country back on track, bringing jobs back, making sure that trade is going well, making sure that we're not getting the end of the deal like we did under President Obama. So there's a lot of things out there that's going on right now that President Trump's taken the lead on, and we've seen great progress.
And beyond that, he's at 50% approval rating, which is 7 points higher than Obama was at this point in his first term. You wouldn't know it from watching the mainstream media, though. You just touched on something else that I think is really important, and I want you to expand upon that a little bit. When you're selling Donald Trump to a skeptical millennial, somebody your age or a little bit older, younger, when you're trying to convey why Trump is the candidate for the young, what things do you point out? You mentioned some issues that are dear to the hearts of millennials. In what ways can Trump address issues primarily important to this younger generation that's rising?
Well, we see with Betsy DeVos. She's working on working with loan credits. We're working to make sure that students, when they get out of college, they're not going to be swamped to the point where they can't even afford to buy a house. They're going to have to live with their parents for a couple of years. I know people that live with their parents for about 5 to 10 years because they just can't afford to move out on their own because the loans are just incredibly outrageous. The prices of university. And it also doesn't help the fact that, at universities, you see primarily, loans being given out to students based on color. It's not even at the fact where if let's say for me being a white Caucasian, having the same GPA as an Asian student, same clubs and all, being involved the same amount, I'm most likely not going to get the scholarship because she is of a minority descent. And that's unfortunate, but that's what we're seeing on college campuses. We're seeing that all across the country. People think it's outrageous to hear, but it's actually happening. And we're seeing it day in and day out at universities. And of course, they're not admitting to it, but they do accept quite more minority students than they do of any other color. And that is the issue in itself, is that we are not being equal. Everybody talks about equal rights, equal protection, but it's a double-sided sword, and they're being hypocrites about it. And, the way that we move forward as a country is we just learn to accept everybody, no matter what their color is, no matter what race, gender, what have you. But, he has done a lot so far to ensure that moving forward, especially with Secretary DeVos, that, schools, protecting schools, we're talking about the gun control issue where, it is an issue. There needs to be more background check. There needs to be protection of schools. Arming teachers is not a bad idea. It's a great start to the discussion. Now, will it happen right away? Probably not, but it's a great start to a discussion that needs to happen in this country. But, I think I saw more millennials motivated by issues that don't directly affect them yet than issues that are affecting them now, especially in terms of immigration. A lot of millennials, especially on college campuses, were really toned up about immigration, economic policy, a big one. A lot of the trust majors, a lot of the business majors, econ majors were all behind us. And we had quite a few on our team, one in our nationals team, actually, that were really behind him because of his economic policy and what he was talking about, what he wanted to do with taxes, cutting the tax bracket down. These things have motivated students, and that's where we keep seeing them come back time and time again, asking to keep, continually be involved because they love him. They love what he's doing. The tax bill was a great success. Now we got to move on to healthcare at some point, but, it's been a great first year.
It really has, and it's been much better for younger generations than a lot of them recognize. You're a college student. I've been a university professor for 25 years. You touched on some of the major problems we have here. Talk a little bit about your campus, your experience as a conservative on campus. You are a very high-profile conservative voice. You've made yourself into one, and congratulations. We need more like you. But what does that translate for you in your classes? Have you gotten any blowback on the college campuses? Is your university giving you any problems? How do you relate in an environment that is so radically progressive with not just conservative views? A lot of kids have those, but the courage and the articulation to go out and make those views impact other people's lives.
Well, every college campus is different. And that's something that, we've accepted as leaders in the young millennial conservative movement. You're going to see a lot of different people at UC Berkeley than you see at, Alabama State or Ole Miss. It's just, the way of life and how things are. Now, liberal bias on college campuses seems to be affecting everywhere. Even at my university, Campbell University, North Carolina, we see a little bit of it, especially with professors. And that's something we fight back against every single day. Now, I know when I traveled across the country and I went to UC Berkeley when Trump had his rally near there, the reaction from protesters really showed how the left loves to act politically. It's not even politics at that point. They throw stuff at you. They call you names. They chase you down. They steal your MAGA hats. We saw plenty of that, especially the poor woman. I'm sure we all saw the footage where she got egged in the face while she's standing outside being surrounded by Antifa, Black Lives Matter members, protesters in general. And it's upsetting. It really upsets me that we went from being able to have good, healthy political discourse to my opinion's right, you're automatically wrong. I don't see where that benefits anybody. I don't see where debate and discussion doesn't help anything, because it does. When you talk about your problems, instead of holding them inside and getting mad when someone asks you about it, you have a much healthier income or a much healthier outcome. I'm sure you've seen that as a professor as well, is that, you want your students to talk to you if they have an issue. But that's not what we're seeing on college campuses. We're seeing silencing. We're seeing, grades being changed. We're seeing students being kicked out of classes because their opinions. We're seeing at San Diego State, they're offering a required course called something along the lines of Trump impeachment, conviction, or resignation. And I just posted that on my Twitter yesterday. But yet we're seeing all this stuff. And it's more so out there now than it was, 10 years ago. I mean, whatever happened to respecting the office of the President of the United States, you may not like the individual, but they've just took it to a whole new level. And it's always fun to pick at, but it's also a serious issue because, this is the start of it here. We might have saw small segments of it 15, 20, 30 years ago, what have you. But now we're starting to see much more evolution to this idea of, not being able to debate, having safe spaces, cry-ins, not wanting your feelings hurt because your views differ from somebody else's. We're seeing so much more of this. Ben Shapiro is a great point. I love the guy. Facts don't care about your feelings, quite frankly. And to see that when I give someone a fact, And then in response, I get an opinionated response from them where they're yelling and arguing at me. It's basically irrelevant. I don't want to hear that. That's not going to solve anything. But that's what we're hearing more of these days. We're not getting facts. We're not having debate and discussion anymore. The only time I see debate and discussion is when I go watch conservatives talk, or I go to CPAC or something, and I see them on the stage and they have a panel. Or, you go to some college clubs and you see debate and discussion. But what you're seeing on television, what you're seeing on CNN, what you're seeing on MSNBC is not debate and discussion. Even some Fox people do it. It's just rallying. It's rally cries, and it's not helpful, especially in the media. And it's unfortunate, but it's affecting millennials as well, because they're the ones going out there. They're the ones going to be looking for jobs. They're the ones that are affected by all this stuff. The lack of continuity in the debate and discussion process is alarming. And it's definitely affecting a lot of young people because they're learning from it. They're taking from it. Some people are learning those methods and going off and doing it on their own. And it's not healthy at all. And we've seen it on college campus after college campus after college campus. On my campus, not so much. I have more establishment-based Republicans. Every now and then I get a comment, but it's not as bad as if you were to go to Washington State University, where you literally have people attacking you. Or if you go to UC Berkeley, the West Coast in itself is fun in terms of college campuses, but you're not going to really see that. My campus, or a lot more southern or southeast-based SEC schools in specific, you're not going to see that. So you might see a little bit, but not as much as you'd see on the West Coast.
Well, you make a really great point there, and one of the things I always see as a university professor, that when there are conservative professors or professors who are not just reflexively liberals, kids come out of the woodwork. I'm amazed at how many liberal kids will take my classes, and they'll tell me, I don't agree with everything or even most of what you say, but it is really refreshing to hear the other side for a change. Do you have the same sense I do from the professoriate? I see it as a student. Do you see it that there's a quiet mini majority, let's call it, of conservative kids out there who don't feel like they can speak out, who aren't necessarily activists, but they're there, and that's a real important demographic that we have to tap into more?
We're seeing a lot of it. More, and especially the point that you just made, we're seeing it where conservatives on college campuses, they are afraid to speak out. They come to places like Twitter. They use pseudonyms. They speak out there. They go on Facebook. But that's not enough. That's good. That's a good start, but it's not enough. We need to bring this debate and discussion to lectures on campus, to panels on campus, do stuff in your communities. I tell millennials all the time, the best way to get involved is to actually get involved. Don't say you're going to get involved and don't do it. Don't just go on Twitter and do something. Go out there in your community and make a change. I love it when a college professor expresses a different point of view, expresses a political point of view, as long as they aren't attacking students for their point of view, as long as students aren't attacking the professor for their point of view. That's kind of the agreement that has to be made between both parties. That kind of debate and discussion is very healthy. You need to have that kind of debate and discussion in a classroom, because these are the centers and bastions for learning and expanding your knowledge and learning other opinions and ideals and accepting them. Now, you can decide to listen to them, or you can decide to walk away and not care. Those are two things. But you should not at any point in time try to attack that person, try to make it where they can't assemble. All the tactics that we've been seeing. Antifa goes into meetings, they'll stop a meeting, they'll pull the microphone away from the person. That goes against everything we as a nation fought for and stand by. It goes against our constitutional rights, and for them to do that, it's anarchy in a way. And I'd go as far to even say that. So I definitely welcome millennials to go out there, talk to their professors, create that discussion. Professors, go out there, engage with your students, and have a discussion that's meaningful, something that you can both learn something from. Because if you're not doing that, what are we really doing in a college? I mean, besides just, grading papers and, having assignments, what are we really doing? You're going there to learn. You're there to learn other views. You can decide to take them home and follow them, or believe them, or create your own. But don't attack them. Don't go out there and, stop somebody's platform, or go out there and, make them not be able to, speak their mind, because that's what the United States of America is about. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. And we can't allow, that to happen in this country, where, people aren't allowed to do that.
And Ryan, I know you mentioned a moment ago CPAC. You were just at CPAC. Did you make a lot of good connections? Tell us a little bit about your experience there in that rarefied air of the CPAC.
Oh, of course. CPAC is always a great time. It's always great to catch up with friends, meet new people, networking. I saw Tommy Loren, talked to her for a little bit there. Even snapped a photo, but we're going to hopefully do some Fox News shoots in the future. But yeah, it's always a great time to, network and to hear the other speakers and their points of view, and especially the side panels, the discussions, everything in the great. They have a couple different things they do there. They have the main sessions, which is the general session in the big room, and then they have the breakout sessions. And the breakout sessions are always great because they cover areas that are very specific. So if you want to learn how to do social media targeting, this is the place to be. If you want to learn how to combat liberalism on college campuses and be effective at it, this is the place to be. It's a great place to learn how to be an activist and to get out in your community and be effective. And this is one of the things I love about CPAC, because as opposed to seeing just older individuals there, I think I see more millennials than older individuals. Even in the media side of things, it's all young people. And that is, Democrats don't have something like that. We are revolutionizing the Republican Party, and CPAC has been, time and time again, showing that it is a big piece to that movement, especially with Turning Point USA, College Republicans. We have some very large student groups that are very involved, very active, and have been making an impact each and every day on college campuses.
Ryan, before we go, let the people know where they can reach you. How can they become part of your movement and help support you?
Of course, yeah. Well, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and you can look up, I'm sure my username's on screen here, Ryan A. Fournier, Fournier. It's a weird French, but yeah, it's right there on screen for you guys. I have a website. Please do check me out, and if you need anything, my email's there, and you reach out to me.
In this corner, your pugilistic pundit, the Duke of Diplomacy, the Professor of Patriotism, the Doctor of Domestic Tranquility.
This is Right Makes Might with Dr. Duke.
And now it's time for Right Makes Might. This week I want to take a look at the top 5 progressive contradictions that have come to light in the week since the school shooting in Florida. Number 1. Progressives are pushing the narrative that Parkland student survivors are the new, undisputable experts on gun control policy. The same progressives are also insisting that these kids' ideas, motives, and rhetoric cannot be challenged because they're kids and must be protected. You see the apparent contradiction here. If we're going to endow children who lack experience, lack insight, lack wisdom, lack political knowledge, we're going to endow them with absolute moral authority and give them microphones and let them speak about things way beyond the school shooting itself, then we have to be able to challenge them. We are not treating them like morally authorized adults. When we don't challenge them, we don't comment, we're not allowed to talk about it. That's a big problem. Number 2, progressives are beginning to argue that Parkland student survivors should lead the push for allowing 16-year-olds to vote. At the same time, millions of college graduates are still living with their parents. Obamacare classifies adults as old as 26 as children, and the same progressives are now arguing that legal gun ownership should rise to age 21. So here you have it, right? I call this the paradox of age when it comes to progressives, that when liberal causes are involved, younger and younger kids should be allowed to vote. Let's lower the vote, simply because these kids have gotten up and read scripted testimonies, made scripted comments, aided by CNN producers to lecture us about gun control. Because that happens, we have to lower the voting age so kids like that get to vote. However, on the other side, when it comes to treating kids like adults, to treating young adults, like the left says it wants to do by giving them voting rights at 16, we keep pushing all of life's major things back. Right? No guns until 21. No lack of childhood until 27. That's another great paradox of progressivism. Number 3, after tragedies like Parkland, progressives push sweepingly broad gun control initiatives, arguing that only the authorities should possess guns and that government alone can keep us safe. Yet what we now know is that government agencies, from public schools to armed police, even more armed FBI agents, were all unable to prevent this tragedy. And even in some instances, they refused to enter the fray, remaining outside the building when the shooting was ongoing. Further, state mental health authorities were fully aware of the shooter's illness. So government is the answer. This is where our founding fathers came in. Our founding fathers are the responsible, consistent, logical response to this kind of lefty propaganda. Government has failed to protect us at every stage. Think about Chicago, right? Some of the strictest gun laws in the world. and some of the biggest gun violence in the world. This is not an answer. We need these guns. We need these Second Amendment protections. We need these opportunities to protect ourselves because government fails all the time. Give me an example of one thing that the federal government took over from the states that they made better, more efficient, and more cost-effective. And the same is going to be true here as well. Number 4, common sense solution to situations like Parkland. One common sense solution is to allow certain qualified teachers and administrators to arm themselves and to expand the number of armed guards and police on school campuses. But these ideas are vehemently rejected by the media Hollywood and even our child authorities in Florida, whose own security details resemble small militias and whose children are protected day and night by armed security. So you have another one of this. This is the paradox of self-defense, that when it's the president's kids or when it's expensive private schools that presidents send their kids to, when it's Hollywood celebrities and their kids, there can't be too much control, there can't be too much protection, there can't be too many armed men looking out. When it's your kids and my kids, can't let that be in the schools, right? Number 5, and finally, Parkland student David Hogg has directly blamed the shooting on Donald Trump, the NRA, Dana Lash, and Florida Governor Rick Scott. The closest of these so-called responsible parties, Governor Scott, lives more than 6.5 hours away from Parkland. Meanwhile, Hogg is quick to indemnify the school, mental health authorities, the sheriff's deputies, the sheriff, and the FBI from any and all possible responsibility.
Why are these elected officials trying to blame this on the bureaucracy? They're in charge of them. This is their fault. They should have been regulating them. I'm not going to allow them to pressure these people because at the end of the day, it's their fault. These elected officials are the boss of these sheriff personnel, and just like the president is the boss of the FBI, Governor Rick Scott is essentially the boss of Scott Israel, the sheriff, and as such, he should be held accountable. He can't just blame this on the bureaucracy and expect to get reelected.
This is the fallacy of leftist responsibility. Those who are the farthest away from it and have the least to do with it must take the lion's share of the blame. Those who are immediately involved, demonstrably and absolutely, who fail to do their jobs, we excuse them in the name of the larger political point. Hey, I can tell you this, it's just real refreshing to see liberals actually defending cops for a change instead of attacking them. And that's right makes might.
Do you like what you've seen on today's show? Or do you like hearing the sweet whispers of Dr. Duke? Catch the Dr. Duke Show free online every Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube and Facebook Live. Then listen to it again on the podcast version on SoundCloud and iTunes. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review or a long bitter diatribe, whichever works for you. And now, it's time for Dr. Duke's Quote of the Day.
Time now for the quote of the day. That liberty-loving, American-observing Alexis de Tocqueville, that wonderful commenter on American life and mores, once said, "Liberty cannot be established without morality, nor morality without faith." And so you got 3 really fantastic observations here that apply to today and to this gun controversy that's arisen in the wake of Parkland. Number 1, you've got liberty. And liberty is purely a gun issue. Liberty is the right of people to protect and defend themselves from a government and from violence. That's a liberty issue. Guns are not a moral issue, nor are they a faith issue. Anybody can use a gun morally or amorally or unmorally or immorally, in the same way you can use a knife or a car. Guns are a liberty issue. The Second Amendment guarantees our liberty to be able to protect ourselves with guns from government. But the second 2 are more important. They're bigger than liberty issues. They are the foundations, the only foundations on which liberty can thrive. Liberty cannot be established without morality. We must first be a moral people, as the Founding Fathers said. A moral and an educated people. See, if we're a moral people and we teach morality in schools, good old Bible-based Judeo-Christian morality in the schools, then you will have less Nicholas Cruzes in the world. So morality trumps liberty. Liberty cannot be established without morality, nor morality without faith. And faith is the keystone of morality, the cornerstone of morality. It's the foundation, again, on which morality is built. And out of morality and faith come liberty. Let's not fix our gun laws that aren't really broken. Let's enforce the laws that we have. And let's start teaching morality and faith in our schools again and watch gun violence plummet. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.